I start with strategic thinking. It's first because people looking forward, looking into the horizon. And you and I are both very strategic thinkers. Perceived weaknesses, and that term is still used, or I like better areas in need of improvement, or areas to work on, or areas to look at.
Well, hello, welcome back to the Shifting Schools podcast. My name is Tricia Friedman, and this week we have something that I think is really, really special. I'm super excited to be delivering you what was a pretty vulnerable conversation for me. A few weeks back, I was very lucky to be introduced to Robert Landau. Now, if you've been a part of international education, Robert is something of a legend. His name is quite recognizable, and that's because he is an established head of school who's served in many places all around the world. He's now currently the founder of Two Roads Education. He's a trusted leader when it comes to all things school leadership, and for good reason. Now, when I met Robert, we had a great conversation, and he let me know that, of course, he does some executive coaching. When he does executive coaching, he also builds on the CliftonStrengths online assessment. And he said, hey, Tricia, if you take that online assessment to find out your 5 strengths, I'll do a review of it for you. And I was like, Robert, that's incredible. Really? Are you sure? And then because I know Robert's such an experimental guy and he's really interested in what AI is doing to change education, I said, Robert, would you be open to us having a little bit of an experiment where I'm going to take the report that I get from CliftonStrengths and I'm going to see if AI can coach me through it, and we'll compare what AI can do to your human assessment? He said yes. And I said, Robert, can we take the experiment just a little bit further and we share our conversation as a podcast so others can learn from this experiment? He's such a risk taker that without any hesitation, he agreed. So you're going to get to hear the vast majority of that conversation. And I also will say that in the show notes for this episode, you can find the specific prompts that I used once I had my strengths to see what ChatGPT could do to coach me, as well as what Google's NotebookLM could do to help me better understand my strengths and how that might help me as a collaborator. So I hope you enjoy our conversation. You'll be able to learn all about Robert's work as well as Two Roads Education by heading over to the show notes. And before I start the episode, I just want to remind you that if you like this idea of getting experimental with AI, coming up April 17th, you can join Jeff Udick and I for a special 3 for the price of 1 day of learning about AI literacy. When you head to shiftingschools.com, you learn about that special day and how we're really setting you up for strategies that are actionable that you can implement immediately. As a listener of this show, you can also use special promo code SSPOD25. That's all caps, SSPOD25 to get an additional $25 off. Now it is my great pleasure to welcome to the show the extraordinary leader and very generous Robert Landau. Robert, I have butterflies in the best possible way. We're doing something really different, novel, maybe even, dare I say, pioneering. You've been so generous in encouraging me to do a strengths assessment. It's been a very long time since I've done it. So I've done that again, and we're doing a little bit of a hybrid where I've taken those results. I'll get into a little bit later on how I used AI to help me analyze those results. But then, I think you and I both are of the mindset that it's worth testing. And we also want to see, you are such an established professional when it comes to doing this review, and your generosity in offering to help me better understand the report is great. So we're going to do a little bit of a, where is the human led really amazing? Where might there be the potential for using AI? And maybe what does it mean to do a hybrid? So I'll turn it over to you, just prefacing and saying, thank you so much for lending your expertise, generosity, and time here.
It is my pleasure to do that. Maybe one of my favorite strengths is the context strength, which is a strategic strength. And just to give you a quick background of where I learned about this was at Singapore American School. This was a school that invested heavily into CliftonStrengths. We had a team of consultants coming in 3 times a year. It's a large school, so there were over 750 teachers, plus support staff, plus auxiliary staff, and everyone went through the strengths assessment. They had a different way of doing this. You had a one-to-one debrief with a colleague, not with the consultant, because there's way too many people. So I had my first debrief of my top 5 strengths with a friend and colleague at the school. We took a walk and had a talk, and it just resonated with me. And looking back at the schools that I had run over the years, I wish I had known my strengths coming into a new school, especially a school that needed some transformational work, to find out that I'm a strategist, I'm a futurist, and not everybody is. And so I really embraced my strengths and I embraced the process. And then I just started with my wife and my kids and my friends. And I said, I got to practice. I got to try this, do this and let me try to debrief you. And I didn't do a very good job at the beginning, but it's one of those things. The more you do it, the better you get at it. It's like a skill. And now I've done hundreds of people. Here we are today unpacking your top 5 strengths.
I love that, Robert. And I know that I've said this to you before, but I also see just tremendous value in what you do from kind of like a human behavior standpoint, because, in my very first conversation with you, it became very clear to me that you're someone who kind of sees others as having strengths. Like it seems to me as though that's very much solidified kind of in your worldview. And I've been thinking a lot about what it would mean to kind of go around with Robert glasses. And I'm going to try to put my Robert glasses on more often.
Well, thank you for that. And in the traditional instructional supervision or evaluation process that we do in business, in school, it very much is a formula where the evaluator who has looked at performance on a one-off or over a period of time will sit down with the person and say, so Tricia, I really noticed these wonderful things about you when I observed you or over the last few months. And you know what's coming next. It's the but however. And the but however is perceived weaknesses, and that term is still used, or I like better, areas in need of improvement, or areas to work on, or areas to look at. The next thing that happens is setting goals. And the goals are set around what?
Sometimes around what the school wants, not necessarily what the person wants, or goals to work on those areas of improvement.
Exactly. The goals 9 times out of 10 are the but however. And in strengths, it's just not the way it works, which is what I love about it, is that you have your 5 and I have mine. Between us, we could have 10, which makes us stronger together. If you have a team of 5, you could have 25 strengths. And so what would be called my weaknesses are covered by somebody else. And as long as I know what their strengths are, I can collaborate better than having my supervisor say, I'm going to dilute what you do best and focus on what somebody else does better. That just doesn't make any logic to me anymore. And so when I work with any team, it's pooling our strengths. And then when we plan something, then execute something, then analyze something, everybody's pitching in according to where they are strongest. And to me, that's just better for self-esteem, for motivation, for inspiration, and for output.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And, one of my, personality quirks is if I'm on a plane, I absolutely love watching sports documentaries. It's my go-to comfort watch. And you have me thinking about, there's a number of really great ones about team dynamics. And I'm thinking about The Last Dance, about the Chicago Bulls and their reigns in the NBA. And, it's sort of like you're not trying to make every player on the court be Michael Jordan. Like, you need a Scottie Pippen. You need players who are dramatically different. They're going to bring different things to the team. So I love that.
So if you could go to the next slide. A quick review of the domains. I start with strategic thinking. It's first because it's the people who are looking out, people looking forward, looking into the horizon. And you and I are both very strategic thinkers. And we'll talk about that in a moment, an analogy that I want you to think about. And so these are people that are the ideation, the futuristic, are people that are constantly saying, well, why can't we do that? Why we should be doing something different. We should be improving. There should be transformation. And then there are the really deep dive strategic thinking that you have, which is the analytical, which is the input and intellection. Deep strategic thinkers do not press go until they are absolutely convinced and ready. The opposite domain to that is the executing domain. These are people that are outstanding in the moment, at the event, at the activity. The decision's been made and watch them go. They care very much about results. They have very high standards for themselves and others. Sometimes that can creep over into the way they observe and the way they analyze how people are behaving in the moment. These are people that are very deliberative. They have discipline and focus. My favorite executing strength is restorative. The restorative strength is one of my favorites. Then you have the blue domain, the relationship building. These are people, and there's two different categories there. You have the empathy, harmony, positivity. These are people like, I care how people feel. I want a harmonious world. When you make a decision, how are you going to feel? How's Tricia going to feel about that? How's everyone else going to feel? How do I feel? And sometimes that can get you bogged down around making a decision based on how people are going to receive that decision. And then you have the coaching and mentoring strengths like developer, individualization, includer, connectedness. And finally, the least populated domain is the influencing domain. When I work with educators, it's down around 10%. If any team that I work with, it could be a team of 5 and 10, you're going to have maybe 2 or 3 people with influencing in their top 5. It's very interesting. And especially in a world right now, Tricia, where people post on social media that they're influencers and they think that they can say something or do something and other people are going to follow them. And some people do and some people don't. I look at people who are politicians, lawyers, people in the arts often have these high influencing strengths because they have no problem standing up and saying what they think and trying to get others to follow them. And as we know, you can influence for what we would call the greater good. And there are people out there influencing for what we might say are more negative messaging. So if you go to the next slide, you can kind of see the way this all comes out per capita for the 33 million people who have taken this assessment. And it's, as you can see, influencing is lower. And in my experience with education, it's 30, 10, 30, 30. And it also makes you realize that when you're sitting with a staff of 40, and you're talking about the next best thing and that we should incorporate, we should look at AI, incorporate AI in their teachers. You have 30% of the people who are saying, not until I'm ready, not until I can do it, not until you prove it to me that it's going to improve standards. You have 30% of the people who are saying, but how are people going to feel about that? How are people going to accept that? We can't do it until everybody feels good about it. And you have 15 to 10% are saying, why didn't we do that yesterday? I'm going to convince you to do it. And then you have the strategic thinkers who know it's the right thing to do. You have people flexing and igniting other strengths. I have to tell you one thing before you go to the next slide. There are 3 anomalies that I have found in people's results in their top 5 that very rarely happen. Number one is it's very rare that people have all 5 strengths in one domain. And I just saw a report for somebody I'm going to do a debriefing with shortly, and they have 5 relationship building strengths, 5 out of 5. If you had somebody with
Wow.
5 executing strengths, that person would be a force. The second anomaly is 4. Very rare that people have 4 in one domain. And the other anomaly is to have a strength in every domain. And you know, our whole system is built on, well, kids have to take everything so they're balanced. People aren't balanced. When you look at their strengths results, they don't have a strength in every domain. So the common result is 3 or 2. So 3-1-1 or 2-2-1. So now you can look at yours and see what your distribution is.
Hi, folks. We'll get back to our conversation in just a moment. I want to talk a bit more about newlight.io, the AI FERPA compliant, that's our federal guidelines around privacy of student data, platform making personalized student support a breeze. You know, student privacy is huge in our schools, and Newlight is big on privacy as well. It was one of the first questions I asked the co-founder, Jose, about. There are a few AI systems out there that meet the requirements to being FERPA compliant, and Newlight does just that. Newlight's IntelliTier platform is more than just a data collection tool. It's an AI-powered assistant that has been trained to truly understand the MTSS framework, student context, and school-specific resources. Developed by a team with both social, emotional, and behavioral needs in mind, and with plans to extend into academic support soon. Studies show effective MTSS and SEL implementations can boost attendance, improve grades, and increase graduation rates. Yet many schools struggle with the complexities of gathering data and turning that data into actionable items within the MTSS process. Newlight's IntelliTier platform makes it easy with simple, fast data collection, asynchronous collaboration across the MTSS team, and actionable insight that educators can implement and document their success with. Plus, Newlight is advised by seasoned educators and administrators, so they understand your everyday classroom challenges. You have to try it out for yourself. So head over to newlight.io to give it a try for free. That's NEULIGHT.io. Thank you to Newlight for taking this on, and a proud sponsor of the Shifting Schools community.
I'm wondering, before I do that, is there, are they looking at, and listeners, I should say, when you take the test, you can opt into, they have research database. Do I want my data being shared in that way or not? I tick yes. Do they break it down, or are you aware, do they break that down generationally? Like, I'm kind of wondering if we're seeing any shift, or do you know if they're even kind of curious about splintering down into the data to see how it's evolving?
I don't know, but I can give you a quick brushstroke. Is for the last 3 years, I have done a group of college students, but young ones. So 17, 18, maybe 19. And I am going to be doing 7, I think it's 7 or 10 in February. And to be honest, when I have a group of students, it's no different than a group of adults. It's still to find somebody with 5 in one domain or oh, they're young. It's 2025. They're going to be more influencing strengths. Haven't seen it. Haven't seen somebody all of a sudden, an 18-year-old in 2025 with 3 influencing strengths. I don't see it.
That's fascinating.
Because there's a lot of nurture and nature that goes into how these strengths come to be. A lot has to do with upbringing, role models, what people see. And sometimes it can actually produce an opposite effect. I've met people who have grown up in a very difficult home background where there has been abuse, zero empathy demonstrated on a daily basis. And guess what? Empathy is in their top 5 because they made a conscious or unconscious decision that that's not the way they want to interact with people, that they don't want to do to others that were done to them.
Yeah.
Or you can have people that have grown up in a very hostile situation where empathy is not anywhere in their top strengths, because it's like, that's the way it's going to be. That's the way I'm going to treat other people.
Have you either anecdotally, just sort of, observation, schools, high school, middle, primary, or departments by discipline, do you feel like you're seeing any commonalities in that regard?
No, because what people do, they do it as per their strengths, but their passion may be physics, and they may be an AP physics teacher, but their strengths are their strengths. And there are also a couple of things that you can't rule out when you're doing this. One is a person's psychology, and that means their mental, their social, emotional health can dictate their strengths. And then there is their behavior and their character that come from that. And so, for example, the responsibility strength, people can be very psychologically drawn to that strength. They are overtly responsible. They get in other people's business. They're micromanagers. And so that strength is taken over the way they behave. That can happen to anybody, anywhere.
My 5 strengths. So I have intellection, strategic, ideation, achiever, and this fifth one kind of surprised me, but it shouldn't, individualization.
And we'll unpack that in a moment. Quick observation, based on my anomaly conversation and anything else, what's the first thing that struck you? And it could also be the order of strengths, the color, what you see in the colors. Tell me just a quick thing about your quick analysis of your top 5.
I guess my quick analysis is I feel like this falls within the realm of what you were saying. A lot of educators, the 3-2. So I've got 3 in common, and then a 1 that's different, and then another one that's different. I feel like I kind of read this as maybe strengths that, yes, I've had, but also really had to cultivate working in K-12 education. I feel like you have to think strategically and come up with new ideas. You have to execute on them. And then I guess maybe the individualization is separate from that, but I feel like that's maybe a personality aspect of mine.
So you just said a moment ago, you have to think and act strategically. You don't have to, you do. And so the person who has 3 purple instead of 3 green, they may have to, but they don't. So it's not that you have to, it's that you do. And the more you do it, the better you get at it. It strengthens your strength, and it goes from a strength to a talent. And in some cases, because you have 3 grouped together, it actually is a superpower. I do a fun thing with people in workshops where I ask them to create their superhero persona according to their strengths. And so there is no question that you are strategic. And it's also bunched into 1, 2, 3, which means that 60% you are operating with a strategic focus from the get-go. And you're not doing it at surface level. And it's interesting because your ideation comes after your intellection. So that green together is significant. What you have, for example, that I don't have, I have 3 strategic, and you and I share 2. We both are strategic and we both are ideators, so I know what that means. But I do not have a purple in my top 5. You do, which is significant, which means you can plan and scheme and be very transformational in your thinking, and then you can roll up your sleeves because you don't do anything halfway. And then you have the blue, which means that you are thinking about other people and you are thinking about individual people, because you and I just met. We spoke for 40 minutes and you clicked strategically and latched on to me like, I'm going to do something with him. I offered to do something with you, which was my relator strength, because I saw something in you. And between my relator strength and your individualization, you wanted to get to know me more. You wanted to continue this relationship. That's your individualization strength. But you were also thinking, I can do a podcast. I can try some new stuff. You ideated the AI aspect. You ideated the podcast aspect. You see what I mean? So they're all firing together.
And I should say, like, I felt like the catalyst for the collaboration, I very much picked up on you, like, experimenting, ideating. And I feel like as soon as I see that in another person, it's like, let's do this together. Like, you like that dance, I like that dance too.
And, Tricia, here's the thing about data. We're supposed to be using data about everything today, right? Data. Well, data without a reason sometimes is a little artificial for me. But you and I both picked up on something, that we were willing to be pioneers. We were willing to navigate. We were willing to stand and look at the horizon, but we didn't know what that was. Now we know. We know that we're both ideators. And we know that if you get the two of us in the room with double the ideation strength, like, watch out. So now we know for a fact that we both have the ideation strength. We didn't know that when we were starting the vibe. The vibe was, we're picking up something, but now we know what it is. And that's what I love about strengths. And we also know what it isn't. So when two people meet, I reach out and say, we should do this, and I don't hear from them. We know that the strengths that they have aren't connecting with mine, and they aren't really interested in pursuing it, which is fine. Unfortunately, it's not fine with a team. You can't just walk away from your responsibility because you don't have the strength. And so I learned a long time ago, because I don't have an executing strength in my top 5, doesn't mean I opt out of executing. So let's briefly explore each one. Tell me, when you look at introspective, solitary, intellectual, philosophical, reflective thinking, which are the ones that immediately go, yeah, that defines what appears to be my intellection?
Thinking and solitary. That was like an easy, immediate, those two. I feel like intellectual, it feels like the hubris, if I said that or even allowed myself to think it, like that one almost, I imagined the red X going right across it. Maybe introspective and philosophical, maybe those two. And then, like, I would say, sure, reflective, but I'm not sure that I'm really fleshing out the difference between introspective and reflective.
Well, I bet you ponder.
I ponder, yes.
I bet you reflect. And that reflect is often done in a solitary place when you least expect it. And that is why that reflective also has to do with its very deep thinking. It's your being philosophical means you're thinking of different aspects of one situation. I love this metaphor with the oyster. I think it is the perfect metaphor for an intellection person. Tell me a couple of reasons why and think about the oyster when it's closed. Think about coming across 25 oysters as you're scuba diving and you're lifting them up, or you got them in a net. What is it about the oyster and the eventual outcome that you see in this picture that refers to somebody with intellection? I just want to get your take on it before I maybe share mine.
I think for sure the processing, like that oyster needs time people need really time to get into that idea. And then I would say like the complete willingness to be surprised, right? If you only ever knew the exterior of the oyster, it's so hard to imagine what could be inside of that. So I think it's also maybe a willingness to imagine, and then also a willingness to completely be wrong, shocked, surprised by something. Because I feel like, yeah, an oyster is, I think it's a shock that what it can do on the inside does not, that's not communicated by its exterior.
Have you ever shucked an oyster?
Very carefully one time and don't want to repeat it. Yes.
It's not an easy thing to do. Have you ever understood where people have tried to shuck a Tricia?
Oof. Well, that hits home, Robert. Yes. Yeah, that resonates.
So the thing is that in order to get that oyster open, you have to be determined and persistent, and you have to know the technique. Regardless of what you find, once you've opened that oyster, it's a win-win. Win number one is a delicious meal for those who can stomach an oyster, and not everyone can. And I just had oysters the other night, and I was with one of my former Cambodian scholarship students who was visiting Hawaii, now is a 22-year-old college senior, and gave him oysters for the first time. And it was wonderful to watch him navigate. The biggest win when you open that shell is finding a pearl. And that's like, oh, I'm not going to eat. I'm not going to get a meal out of this, but I can buy a lot more meals because of it. But that's the intellection person. It is not in being an intellectual. It's different. Of course, you're smart, very smart. You're smart because you are a very deep thinker. But the intellection person is the person who does not rush into anything. And when you are pulled and pushed, it can feel uncomfortable because you need to know for sure that it's the right thing to do for kids. Because kids are precious. And so when other people are ready to go, they're trying to shuck that oyster in the room to say, when are you going to give your okay? But if you get to know that strength and start out with, I'm Tricia and I have an intellection. And here's what it's going to mean when we work together. Because when I say yes, it's a firm, absolute, definite yes. And it's going to do good, or probably better than the people who say, it doesn't matter if there's detours, we'll get around them. Doesn't matter, if the bridge is out, we'll figure it out. You need those people, Tricia, sometimes. Those are people that have adaptability, which is a relationship building strength. They're people that have a ranger, which is an executing strength. You need those people to support your intellection, but you also sometimes need to say, I'm going to tone down my intellection now because I think we got enough to go right now and I can up it later. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, that makes perfect sense. Jeff Udick, my business partner, is, I think, much more of a let's go with it. If it fails, we'll iterate. And there's a value in that. And it very much, though, is contrary to, I love to do the pre-mortem of what are the 10,000 things that could go wrong first, and it's a balance. And I think that is in part what makes us very good team members, is we can balance each other out there.
You're absolutely right. He
yes,
probably has some of those strengths, other strengths I just mentioned, and it would be good to know what they are. But because you have intellection number 1 and not down around 4, it's not that you come to it, it's that you start with it. So as soon as, if I were to pitch an idea to you, that intellection just comes up right away. And it's like you have this processor, like a hard drive thing going on in your head. And it's just processing, analyzing, sifting, analyzing, processing. And you're really good at it. So some people think intellection people take forever But somebody who has a high capacity for intellection, like you do, because it's number one, you're on speed dial. Like you can absolutely speed up that intellection according to deadlines or sense of urgency. And that's a really amazing talent to have.
I think it's also exactly why in work and personal situations, I'm always, can you give me more information before we're going to meet and chat? Like that's totally, I'm always of that, like, what's on the agenda or what can I read beforehand? I probably, even before you and I met the first time, said something like, what else do I need to know to make the best use of our time? Like that's my covert way of being like, what can I think about to make sure that's spot on? Makes perfect sense.
So let's go to the next one, which we're not going to spend a lot of time.
Okay, folks, are you still with me? I hope you've been enjoying this review of my strengths via Robert Landau. Now, I am going to kind of cut our conversation here because I want to make sure to get you to the part where we discuss the comparison of what I learned from Robert as my human coach, as well as how that compares to the work that I did before this conversation via ChatGPT as coach and NotebookLM as coach. Now, let me read out to you the prompt that I used for ChatGPT. Are you ready? Here it is. You are a human behavior expert who is well-versed in a variety of personality and strengths-based tests. You will review the results for a person named Tricia. You will provide a close reading of the identified strengths and aim to give her advice in terms of what she needs to be more mindful of when working with others. Break all this down into 3 distinct ideas. Explain your thinking. Be succinct, but also remarkable. So with that, I gave it my upload of my 5 strengths. And again, it gave me an output. So that's one of the prompts. There are 2 others, and I'd encourage you to check those out. Again, they're available to you via the show notes of the episode. If you have thoughts on other prompts I could have used, we'd love to hear from you. My email address is over there as well. Okay, now picking back up with my conversation with Robert Landau. Thanks for still being here, folks.
And I have one more kind of closing analogy for you, the strategic thinker. So I live in Hawaii, and of course, going to the beach is a common experience. But the beach is a metaphor for you as well, if you think about it. So you get out of your car, you leave the parking lot, which is not part of the beach, and the first place you step onto is the sand. The sand is your base station. The sand is your everything comes from the sand area. That's where your blanket, your lunch, your umbrella, all your toys, all the stuff, your son, it's all there. What's the next part of the beach?
Oh gosh, like I realize this is the wrong answer. I was going to say like my book on the blanket, but
no, that's all sand oriented.
Yeah. Then we've got that kind of like wet sand edge where we've got the waves are coming in, crashing.
Yeah. So that's the whole next section, the shore, the wet shore to the water. Mm-hmm. And the water is temporary. We go in, we go out. We play, we cool off, but we remember when our parents said, you've been in the water too long. So back to the sand. When I go to the beach, there's a third really important part to the landscape that I focus on, especially at 2 times a day, and I'm kind of late. And that is something that strategic thinkers do a lot. And what do you think I'm referring to?
Getting perspective.
Yeah, and where that perspective is the
horizon.
Right. And I don't speak Hawaiian, and I only know a couple of Hawaiian words, but I was taught a word at a school called Kamehameha Schools. It's a very high Hawaiian culture-based educational place. And the person was talking about the kahiki moi. And the kahiki moi in Hawaiian is the horizon. But it means so much more. If you think about how Hawaii was discovered in the first place, people had the that strategic ideation and thought of going out there, not even knowing what it was. It was that there's something out there for me. And so I spend a long time looking out at the horizon. It really captures my imagination. It captures my thinking, and it kind of defines my life as a futurist. And it probably, if you think of it, and I hope the next time you go to a lake or anything with a land, a water, and a horizon, you'll take that in or use it as a metaphor, is that you are constantly looking out and wondering what's next as a strategic thinker. You have very, very high standards around what it's going to take to get there, what you're going to do when you get there. You're going to do great things every chance you get. And your anchor is your relationship building idea that everyone matters. Everyone has purpose. Everyone has a special attribute. And given the time and the inclination, you will find out who that person is, and you'll get to know them better. But you can't know everybody because that's like impossible. It's too much for you to invest that in every person. But when you do invest in a person, it's, what we've been doing the last couple of weeks, having just met. Does that make sense?
100%. Yes.
And there you have your strengths.
Okay. Now, Robert, I have to say, having had that conversation with you before I hit record, and, we had agreed to experiment AI doing some analysis, you doing some analysis, you had jokingly said like, oh no, are you going to be replaced? And it's like, not even no. And two things immediately come to mind. One is when I took my results, and I'll put in the show notes the prompts that I used. I tried ChatGPT and then I tried NotebookLM. Really comfortable, very easy to go through that as a process with a non-human. But also I would say, it's not a human, of course. And so there's how accurate is this? But at no point did I feel any kind of tension or friction. With NotebookLM, I could have had you can now speak and interrupt, which is kind of cool. It's not the same as having a human-to-human conversation. Like at no point in going through that output did I feel like, oh, I'm sweaty, or does it matter if that's actually insightful? So the human-to-human element of the coaching that you just did, no, AI cannot replicate that as an experience. I feel like if you're doing any kind of coaching or introspective work and it feels so comfortable and easy, I don't think there's going to be any stretch there. I don't know if that makes sense. So I'm not trying to say like, Robert, you were great because you made me uncomfortable, but I hope you know what I mean.
I do know what you mean. And now I feel good about having this conversation. If you did not have what we just had, what I listened to was more than adequate, because it certainly has taken all the CliftonStrengths documentation and put it together accurately. I did find it a bit formulaic and a bit clinical. And so that's what you're going to get when an AI is, and I love the fact that it does and, it does try to
have
fill in
words,
those non-communicative gaps that we should actually be telling kids not to use and but it threw that in a couple of times. And so if that's all you had, it's way better than reading a report, because it was personal and they used your name repeatedly. But here is the difference with me, and I do believe this is true. Steve Martin, the comedian Steve Martin, he did a routine once where he asked the audience how much they paid to get in tonight. And it was a long time ago. So it was $5. And they said, oh, $5. Sometimes I give a $10 show. And what I love about people who take this kind of work seriously is I try to do the best I can with every conversation I have. And, I will finish this conversation and we'll need to lie down because I use a lot of energy, I don't want to compromise when I have this conversation because I'm talking about somebody's, inner self and inner feelings. And I've had people, especially with relationship building strengths, cry because I struck a nerve around their nurture nature story. And I have to be very careful about that. So what I'm trying to say is you got a $10 show for a $5 ticket because you were so good at making that happen. So sometimes it's a $4 show for a $5 ticket because the person is a bit ambivalent. They're not buying it, or, that happens rarely, fortunately, but sometimes I will talk to somebody and who are you talking to?
I wonder though, to be totally honest, if I had had this opportunity with you in my late 20s or 30s, I don't know that I would have been as able to, it is, I think, an emotional intelligence, aspect there to be able to have the conversation, sit with the compliments. I couldn't have done that 10 years ago. It is uncomfortable and awkward, but I feel like the longer I'm alive, the more it's like, you know what, enjoy it, take it. And I will say though, I wonder if by using the AI first, I got past some of the awkwardness. Mm-hmm. And I should say, you picked up on, you felt like the AI knew, the assessment model. So I tried to do the right thing and I didn't give the PDF that I got from the company. I copy pasted and, I took my 5 strengths and I added that and it knew which test it was. I didn't tell it which test. And there were a few things that in my prompting, I did tell it to, use my name.
Yeah.
And I will say, though, I felt really comfortable in one of the ways I used it was tell me about the team dynamics part to try and help me understand when it's difficult to work with me. And that's a thing where that it's kind of nice to go through that on my own without another human. But I would almost say that helped. It was like doing the stretching warm-ups before we went for the run.
And that's spoken like a true intellection person, that you cultivated that whole thing that any other person would not have done. And that's what makes it really interesting. And you said originally, I want to do some data mining here and in this process. So I'm not just, thank you for arranging a debrief, but I'm going to do more because I ideated it and I thought about it. So this has been so informative to me as well. But I try to treat this as a conversation. Do you think it was interesting at times when I made assumptions about you accurately?
100%. And I think that's the thing that even if an AI did that, I wouldn't feel it in the same way. That seems really important in any kind of coaching conversation to me, I think, is having the emotional response, because it is when it really sits and lands and feels accurate, it's almost like that imprints. I'm going to remember that part of the conversation weeks, months, probably years from now. I'm not going to be able to quote back anything that ChatGPT said to me.
And that's interesting. And I can't do executive coaching with somebody without knowing their strengths. I can't begin a collaborative relationship anymore without knowing their strengths. So knowing that, and I suspected or anticipated that this was not going to be a nice to meet you, see you around situation, I couldn't go any further without offering this to you. Because I sensed an opportunity, which has proven to be correct. You've given me way more than I would normally have in a one-to-one situation, because you had your own ideas around what this could mean for you. I want you to know it meant a lot to me as well.
That feels really super generous of you to say, because honestly, I feel like you did so much of the work. I mean, I guess if I could ask one more thing of you, though, I'm kind of curious. I don't see AI as replacing the analysis of anybody's strengths. I would say for somebody that maybe can't afford coaching, maybe it's like, okay, that's the next best option. But I would be so curious in a kind of collaborative sense. Like if I took your 5 strengths, my 5 strengths, let's say we were working with another person, and then I had ChatGPT do some kind of analysis in terms of come up with some suggestions for, working protocols that these 3 people might want to balance. I don't know. Like I wonder, or even just let's say you implemented this across Singapore American School. What if for a PD day, if you did have access to everyone's and, you could take away the names, the privacy, generate based on all of this 20 teams optimized for whatever. Like, I wonder if it would do that, but also should we do that or not?
Well, the answer is yes, it will, because it is so highly capable. In fact, if you think of some of the things it can handle, this is still that it figured that out. So if I I do a chart with every team that I work with, and I actually put it through ChatGPT to give me how many strengths are repeated, where are the one-off strengths, creating word clouds. And I used to have to do that differently. Now I use ChatGPT for a lot of my group work. But here's the thing. I'm working with a little elementary school right now up the road, 97 kids, small school, but they have latched onto this. I just did an hour with the entire faculty. They want me 3 months back, like every month, come back and do activities with them. That's the way it works. The problem when I do a lot of this work is, okay, you can't just hire me to do the debrief and the team debrief. I'm sorry, but this is, you either need me to train somebody on your campus to be the strengths coordinator, and I'll show you what to do at every staff meeting, what I call 5 minutes of strength, or you need, because people don't sustain it. So you could go through that whole analysis using ChatGPT for the team. You could do what you do. How do I need to work with others, and how do they need to work with me? But if you don't practice it. So are you still doing any kind of athletic pursuit?
Fitness is, as best as I can, a part of every day. But I would say, even I love following sports. It's probably why I love watching sport documentaries. So I think even the story of sports is very, very important to me.
So I, made a resolution now going on over a year and a half ago to try to stay fit because of my new grandkids. And I got to be around for as long as I can. And part of it is I just need to do the fitness, but I am terrible. If I'm about to travel as you are, and I'm more like, is there a gym where I'm staying? Because I don't run, I'm not a jogger. So you know what I'm saying? Strength is the same way. If you don't practice, if you don't talk about them, if you don't find somebody, like when we meet in Washington, we need to bring it up. I may say to you, so in the last week, tell me an ideation you had, when and where. If you don't use it, you lose it.
I'm guessing that's why, it's so interesting to me that you did this with your children. It makes perfect sense to me that this should be a family activity. And Robert, I never thought of that. Like, that idea of doing this as a family never dawned on me. Other than yourself, do you know anybody that's done that?
Well, I'll give you a really interesting anecdote. So a friend of mine does a podcast, and he had his daughter on as his guest. And I listened to it, and I called him up and I said, I got to do her strengths. I knew her, didn't really know her, but I said, there's something coming out. I just want to make sure I'm hearing what I'm hearing. And so long story short, I did her strengths. We had a lovely conversation. She was engaged. And she goes, oh, my fiance, my husband to be, I have a strong feeling we don't have the same strengths. Mm. I said, look, this could be chancy, but would you like me to do his strengths? And then would you like me to do the two of you together? And they did. So I did his strengths. Total different set, like polar opposite strength set. Could be problematic, especially 15 years in. So I did the two of them together, and that has been very much part of their relationship ever since. But here's the clincher. I had an ideation because this was a pure case of like her 5 and his 5 were, and I said, you bring those together and they're more powerful.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I wrote a song called The Power of Two and sang it at their wedding in front of them. And last night, my friend, the father, said the wedding video, they just produced it. They got your entire song and they got the reaction of the couple while you were singing it, and, wait till you see it. My point is, yes, it was really necessary, and it was fundamentally important for them to know this about each other. And no marriage counselor, like pre-marriage counselor, could have done it better.
Well, and it's different from that. I think even just the starting point of we're looking at it from a strength, not a deficit. I'm going to see value in my partner.
We have a very dominating, influential person who I think I would love to do his strengths because he has influencing strengths that he's had to exacerbate for some reason because he feels like he has to do it 10 times more. And just having competition, for example, which is an influencing strength, just having it and using it well is overpowering for most people.
Yeah, I would imagine any kind of autocrat, dictator personality. I think there must be commonalities there with strengths. But yeah, what an interesting research project to do.
Which what I meant is when I do strengths coaching, executive coaching, I do some counseling because those strengths determine who we are. But with some people, their strengths are so overpowering and so out of control that it has created, that's their psychology. That's their character, that's the behavior, that's the way they think. Because they've gone unchecked, their thermostat's broken, and they don't listen. Socially, emotionally healthy people who want to do the best they can and be the best person they can be, they take strengths coaching well, they listen, and they really take on that thermostat idea. And so many people come back to me and say, hey, thanks for that, because just yesterday I had to kind of tone down my responsibility strength because I was getting in people's face. So thank you for reminding me.
Well, I look forward to seeing you in DC, and we will chat more about strengths and how our thermostat, where it's at.
Well, thank you too, because as a relator, I feel like I have a new friend, and I know that friendship isn't going to be, surface level.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. I wanted to remind you not to miss out on our webinar series happening April 17th that we're calling Unlock the Power of AI for K-12 Learning. Join us for 3 engaging 45-minute webinars designed for future-facing educators like you. Can't make it live? No problem. Your ticket includes access to all the recordings. Remember to use code SSPOD25 at checkout to save $25 on registration. If you have a team of 5 or more who would like to join us, contact us for our team rate. You can learn more and register at shiftingschools.com. Hope to see you there, April 17th.